Lorenzo Puttanesca has been meeting with two men, Richard Wynne, the mayor-elect, and another much gruffer figure, a man named Bowers, Wynne's chief of security. Lorenzo has been working with Wynne for several nights now on the design of a custom-made mobile command unit for a future project that Wynne has planned. Lorenzo has come up with several features that he wished to discuss with his Fomore client. Various scanners, armor additives, online access points, weapons, and so on. Wynne is very pleased. The soon-to-be mayor has brought along Bowers, not just to approve the project's progress, but also to suggest that Lorenzo hire on some of Bowers' men. Bowers owns a security company in Beaverton, Oregon called Damn Good Security, and their reputation speaks for itself. Looking into the company, Lorenzo finds that they do in fact have a good reputation, though anyone they protected against has found themselves roughed up quite a bit. Lorenzo just sees them as being pretty similar to the Puttanesca. Wynne lets Lorenzo know that they're also in on the supernatural situation, and that kind of thing won't be a problem. After a bit of back and forth, Wynne lets Lorenzo know that they're a type of werewolf. Later on, Tinia is seen walking into the last drop. Marty, a barrel-chested lumberjack-looking ghoul that belongs to someone in that Brujah line, lets her know that she missed a call, and they only left a number. When she calls the number back, it's Wynne, who invites her to a meeting the next night. The next night, Tinia and Lorenzo are standing outside of City Hall. A little conversation between the two, as Lorenzo tells Tinia that they need to get together to discuss what the Hecata have discovered about Project Cicada and Nick's involvement. The conversation is cut short, however, when Bowers opens the doors to City Hall for them and walks them into the meeting room. As she passes by the large, intimidating man, Tinia has a premonition about how dangerous this man could actually be. He leads them to their destination from behind, which just makes Tinia's feelings about him that much worse. Inside the meeting hall, they're all greeted by Wynne with a big smile on his face and an empty boardroom table. He offers them to help themselves to a decanter of blood that he has set up in the back of the room. Underfed as always, Tinia cautiously accepts the provided nourishment. Tonight is the night before the election, and Wynne tells them it's in the bag. Since none of the PCs have done anything to stop this from happening, he's right. He tells them that he understands that some of their kind, gesturing towards Lorenzo, indicating his clan, sometimes get flashes of insight on the future events, especially people's deaths. He informs them that his kind also has that occur from time to time, and he believes that the city commissioners are not going to be around much longer. He wants to build something out of this upcoming tragedy. Wynne then proceeds with a detailed PowerPoint presentation discussing who the commissioners are, what they do for the city. He goes on to say that he wants them to fill 2 of the upcoming vacancies. He wants to fill the city council with supernaturals, wanting Bowers to take the role as city security, and he knows an elemental that would be great for the position of environmental commissioner. This obviously takes Lorenzo and Tinia back a bit. He tells them he just wants to let them know what he was thinking, to present a good presentation. They have time to consider it, talk to their people, and decide. The scene continues with Tinia and Lorenzo in Lorenzo's car, trying to put what they had just heard into the background of their thoughts as they focus on the situation with Nick, Project Cicada, and the Second Inquisition. Lorenzo informs Tinia that it doesn't appear that the fungus is transferred by Nick using his disciplines on anyone, and Nick has agreed to allow bagged blood to be provided to him to stop the spread if it is contracted by being fed on. He goes on to tell her that from what they've learned from Pete, one of the Hecata, The fungus causes the infected to first become sterilized and then to die within 5 years. There's no telling what it could do when being mixed with whatever the SI stole from the Nosferatu. Lorenzo then explains how addictive Nick's blood seems to be. The next night at the last drop, on a very slow night, due to all the excitement over the last few nights, the door that separates the bar from the clubhouse is shut. Only Tinia, Miles, and Jay, who's tinkering away at one of his projects, are there. Occasionally, Marty comes back through the employees' only bar entrance to get things to restock the mortal side of the establishment. Interactions start off with Tinia questioning Jay about his project. She can see that he's working on something with some kind of gun, and it's a little unnerving. Jay goes on to explain that everyone will find out soon enough, which honestly makes it sound so much worse. He seems to be making some kind of gun out of rebar he has stolen from the construction site a while back, but Jay says he's working on them as gifts. Tinia then moves to talking to Miles, who's just trying his best to take down a Kindred census of the area. Specifically, he's been trying to figure out how many Nosferatu there are in the area, because Tinia needs to talk to one of them about the spawning pools she's overheard about, and suspects she can get answers about what is going on with Nick from one of the sewer rats. This conversation goes into information about Monroth and how Miles heard from Colin that Monroth was supposed to be embraced into Clan Brujah years back. Unfortunately, some Nosferatu that had a grudge against the clan embraced him out of spite and was blood hunted down. The conversation starts to drift to the fact that many of the anarchs in the city are starting to spread rumors. They don't trust her because she punched off the head of Damien and was put in power by the Sabbat and the Camarilla. The fact that the anarchs didn't have anything to do with choosing their own leadership is eating away at the city's morale. Miles then asks if Tinia had heard about the vandalism that occurred in the Pearl District the night before, just before dawn. Apparently, in the early morning hours, 3 buildings were heavily vandalized, a car was flipped over, and some antique furnishings were burnt in the street. The buildings were the old locations of the Penny Diners Club, an antique store, and a restaurant called Frankie's Place. Miles then pulls out an envelope that he said that he got from Mason, Merrick's child who works in the police department. It has a photo from a tagged building from outside of one of the attack zones. Mason made sure that it wasn't in the press. It's a cutlass that, if turned sideways, is made to look like fangs. Miles goes on to say that it's a sign of a group of anarchs called the Pariahs, who are run by a kindred called Matty Lil. The group is big, and they call themselves a community, not a gang. Miles then leaves to try to locate a Nosferatu that's willing to talk to Tinia. Tinia herself then goes on to call Lorenzo, who's already heard about the attacks. All 3 buildings were either owned or connected to the Hecata in some way. He asks if she's calling for a formal declaration of war. She tells him that she's not behind the attacks, which he doesn't directly believe, and that she needs not only a head count of the Hecata, but a list of all the businesses the Hecata holds sway over. The conversation is short, and the building hostile attitudes are obvious. After she hangs up, Tinia is then blindsided by Jay with the question about the plague that is spreading in the city. When she asks where he heard about that, he just said from the wind, and then starts to panic because she doesn't deny it at all. When she says it's on a need-to-know basis, Monroth comes out of Obfuscate behind the bar and says that she's starting to sound just like a Camarilla prince with all the cover-ups from her own people. They talk about the Nosferatu spawning pools and how they're used to create ghouls, and how fungus is affected. Monroth suggests that they kill the infected kindred, and leaves. We then find Lorenzo surveying the damage of the Pearl District, driving around in one of his special Putin-esque vehicles, heavy armored, loaded to the teeth with weapons, with a few human cousins and his new night shift guards, hired from Bowers in the back seat. Whole areas of the district are blocked off. Police are everywhere. And as he drives by, Lorenzo finds that Teeny's club is not only fine, it's doing very well. A street concert is taking place. The roadsides are littered with couches and chairs that look like they've been lifted right out of someone's living room. Stereotypical punks are everywhere enjoying the show. It looks as if the club spilled out onto the road. When Lorenzo and company arrive outside Frankie's place, the building is a burned-out husk of its former glory. This was once one of the nicest places in town, a model of fine dining, and now it's a pile of smoldering ashes. The waist-high iron fence that separated the outside dining area from the pedestrians lays flat over crushed rose bushes. The ambient lighting that crisscrossed above customers' heads and provided subtle mood lighting torn apart. Strands of broken bulbs now swing in the breeze like gallows ropes, hungry for the necks of those responsible. Lorenzo then calls Sonny. He answers, and Lorenzo is relieved that his cousin wasn't injured in the attack. They talk for a bit, and Lorenzo doing most of the talking. Sonny just sounding like a broken shell of his true self. The business was his pride and joy. They talk about rebuilding. Sonny says maybe in another part of town, maybe in the New Orleans district, where most of the family's holdings are set. Lorenzo lets Sonny know that he's giving the Baron 48 hours to fix this mess. Then it's war. The furious Hikata then heads towards the New Orleans district. On his way, he calls the number that was given to him by Darian King, the Malkavian Archon. Lorenzo gives Darian the contact information for Richard Wynn. Across town, Tinia is listening to the ringtone on the other end of her phone. She's contacting John, the Toreador, who owns the Penny Diners Club, the child of Anna Roma. After a little beating around the bush when he answers, she invites John to meet her at the last drop. Lucky enough, the Toreador was nowhere near the Pearl District last night, but he does seem a bit nervous to be entering a prime Anarch hangout with everything that's been going on lately. Tinia eventually gets around to offering John a chameleon role within the Anarchs. A chameleon within the Anarch movement is essentially a spy. They move within the ranks of the Camarilla and they pass information back to their Anarch leaders. Tinia wants him to keep tabs on the Kindred in the city who feed in his establishment, and he is not interested in the idea. At this point, Tinia rolls a persuasion check against the young Toreador and gets a messy critical. Tinia's vision goes red, and I tell her player, Avalyn, that her Brujah compulsion is now active. Given the back-and-forth nature of the scene and how late it's getting, I tell her to play it out for the rest of the session. As she comes to, John is heading out the door, having happily agreed to take on the position as effectively the harpy of the Anarchs. Tinia has no idea what's just occurred, but notices that Jay is being unnervingly loyal and at her beck and call for the rest of the evening. As Lorenzo and company arrive at the New Orleans district, completely overpopulated with punks and bikers. No one is really doing anything illegal or anything, but the area is just so full that traffic is almost at a standstill. At the painfully slow speed of the car, Lorenzo notices several faces from the night he visited Teeny's club, including Teeny herself sitting along with a large group of people at the fountain that Lorenzo had killed his sire at. Lorenzo texts Tinia, "Are you missing any Anarchs? 'Cause I found them." Barely controlling his potence and trying not to crush his phone. He then sends her some pictures of the current state of the district. Tinia recognizes a few of them. The dawn of the Puttanesca then notices that off to one side, at a decoratively placed gazebo, is the Sabbat pack that helped him escape from McCarthy months before, just sitting and watching the action. He also notices a dark-haired girl with them that he didn't recognize. He also sends a picture of them to Tinia. This sends a sense of dread through the Brujah. Unfortunately, due to Noah being a Lasombra, the picture is so blurry she can barely tell who's in it. Lorenzo tells his special security force that on top of the Anarch issue they're currently dealing with, that the Sabbat is also here. They reassure him that all that he need do is point out the target and tell them how much they need to hurt them. Tinia and Jay are now en route to try and take control of the escalating situation. Lorenzo approaches the Sabbat pack. They actually have a pleasant conversation about the Anarch activity and how Tinia seems to have lost control of the situation. Noah says that Tinia's controlling this mess would be the grand test. Lorenzo asks what happened if the Anarchs fail at this test, and Noah answers that the Seraphim will come. Lorenzo then goes on to let the pack know that there's a Camarilla Archon snooping around, to which Noah says that the Camarilla has broken their side of the bargain. As Tinia and Jay make their way slowly into the district, Tinia notices a strange fog beginning to roll in through the streets. She then notices Lorenzo talking with the Sabbat, the other girl vanishing into the crowd as Tinia approaches. Jay is sticking to Tinia best he can as she walks up to one of the Anarchs and asks if there's an event or something happening that she needed to know about. The punk scoffs in her face and says she sounds like a narc. He's rude and confrontational. This interaction brings the attention of many more leather-clad individuals with flesh-marring appendages. He then says that once she has any position of authority that they recognize, then they'll fill her in. After that, things start to get really bad. A group of punks sitting at one of the bus stops and listening to a boombox, the music drowning out most of the sound in the area. A police officer walks up to these kids to try to tell them to turn it down. The group stands up and confronts the officer. The small group attracts more. The standoff turns into shoves into thrown punches. Lorenzo sends in his security guards to neutralize the situation. As soon as Tinia sees these guards, she gets the same unnerving feeling that she did from Bowers. One of the guards puts on a pair of sap gloves. The other flicks out an extendable metal baton. Activating Daunt, Tinia attempts to intervene. Not wanting to see anybody hurt in this altercation, the fog is getting thicker, as it seems to be flowing out of the fountain. Lorenzo sends Tinia one last text of the evening. Fix it, or leave so that I can. This seems to be the last straw for Tinia, as the Bruja is now at her breaking point. Lorenzo calls in for more of his family to show up for support. Daunt already activated, and with the potents rushing through her, Tinia beelines for the security guards. She yells at them that they shouldn't get involved in this. One of the guards turns to confront the Anarch Baron just as he's knocked off his feet by an unseen force, and goes flying through the air and into the side of a parked car. Someone screams riot. Noah whispers to Lorenzo, "We're going to watch from the roof. You want to come?" Lorenzo says that his money's on the BSDs. And the group of them are enveloped in shadow, re-emerging on the roof. Lorenzo taking some stains to his humanity for the trip. The riot rages. Cars are being flipped. Tinia decides that this mess is too big for her, and she and Jay should leave while they can. She nearly frenzies from the scent of blood in the air, and on her way out of the commotion, Tinia sees the smirking face of Maddie Lil, mocking her on her way out of the New Orleans district. One of Lorenzo's security guards gets a shot off into the crowd and wings Teeny in the shoulder, but she escapes into the fog. The session ends in chaos as the first tear gas cans are launched. A blood war has started. Greetings, Kindred. I am Voivode Maquette, and thank you for watching my recap of the last session we had for Thicker Than Water. I actually am just here to ask you what you thought of this format, because I actually kind of enjoyed doing this a lot more than the regular face-to-face talk. This way I was able to give you a more visual narrative and let you guys see exactly what I'm thinking, or at least kind of what I'm thinking, when I'm doing all these. So, yeah, that's the only reason. That, and also I'm asking you guys to please send me your art, because I have a new thing that I'm trying to do called Our Art of Darkness, which I'm going to be doing during the end credits of the episodes that I have art to do it in. The very first one that I put up is in the Victoria Ash bio, and I thought it went very well. I got 2 beautiful pieces of art from one person, and if I can get some more in there, I'll throw some more out there. So yeah, send it to archfiendst@gmail.com. It's right here, archfiendst, and I will see you next time. Have a good evening. Good night.